Perfect. And then take it off your screen share. And you guys are live.
And you're off the air, right?
Okay. Perfect. All right, you guys are ready? And then take it off your screen share.
I did, yes. Okay. I'll take it off screen share.
And you guys are live.
One participant. And you're off the air, right?
Awesome. So turn off your. All right, you guys are ready? And then take it off your screen share.
I did.
Yes. Right now is on the YouTube.
And you guys are live. One participant. And you're off the. I don't know if this is. Hey everyone, this is Patty with the Breastfeeding Shop.
Ready? You guys are ready? And then take it off your screen share. I did. Yes. Right now is on the YouTube. And you guys are live. One participant. And you're off the.
I don't know if this is. I think we need to restart this. Hey everyone, this is Patty with the Breastfeeding Shop.
Ready? You guys are ready? And then take it off your screen share.
End it. Yeah, something's not.
Wait, don't end it because
okay,
not working.
This happened last time. All you have to do is the tab that was showing the live. You just have to turn down the volume on that. That's why it's echoing.
Okay, I muted it. Can you hear us? But now it's like paused. It's not
frozen.
Working. It's frozen. It's not working.
Okay, let me look on my end real fast.
Yeah, connecting stream software to start preview. Viewers will be able to find you. Okay, I can't really tell if it's working or if anybody can hear me. Can anybody hear us? Let me just ask in the comment section. This is why I like Facebook Lives a little bit better. Anyway, let me know. Can anybody hear? We will be starting soon. Feel free to post your questions while we wait. So I know that there are some people here waiting for us, and we've got a couple of viewers. So I just want to make sure that everybody can hear us right now. When it comes to pumping, do I have to make sure I am giving the breast milk at the same time of day that I pumped? If I give the milk I pumped in the mornings, in the evening. Okay, good, perfect. All right, great. I'm gonna read that question in a second, but I just wanna back up. Hi everybody, I'm Patty with the Breastfeeding Shop, and I've got Lora, our Director of Telehealth and Lactation Services here. And she's an amazing, she's actually joining me live, right, in my house. Because I don't like to, yeah, I don't like to leave my house after 7 o'clock at night. So anyway, so thank you so much for being here. And you know, the Breastfeeding Shop, we love helping new moms, and we recently added this telehealth lactation component to our product offering to help more moms. And every other week, we're going to be doing a different topic, and Laura's really the expert on all this stuff. On the agenda is expressing and storing milk, but it looks like we already have a question. So we're going to read that first because it's very pertinent actually. And then we're going to, if we have time, go over some of the questions and the things that we wanted to discuss. So I don't know if you, so somebody asked, when it comes to pumping, do I have to make sure I'm giving the breast milk at the same time of day that I pumped? If I give the milk that I pumped in the morning, in the evening time, will it keep him up? So
no, it shouldn't keep him up. There's a lot of misnomers there that people think they need to use the milk at the same time of day of when it was pumped, and that's not necessarily true. So I wouldn't be concerned about time of day. I just make sure that I'm labeling it what day I pumped, and then using your oldest to newest is probably your most important thing when you're going into your freezer stash.
Let me ask you something. What about drinking? Because I'm going to start have questions.
I know you are.
But what about if you drink caffeine and you're breastfeeding?
So just like when you're pregnant, you can drink caffeine and still breastfeed. It's not an issue. What a lot of people don't realize is that in the neonatal intensive care units, babies are often given caffeine as part of their treatment for apnea. So a little bit of caffeine is not going to hurt anyone. If we have more than about 300 milligrams of so or caffeine, we may end up having a cranky baby. So kind of watch how your baby reacts. If you're having, you know, the large, really tall Starbucks, that may be an issue where baby gets a little cranky. But for the most part, if we're drinking just our normal amount of a cup or two of coffee a day, it's not going to have any major effect.
It won't. And then if you give that breast milk at the end of the day, it won't have.
No, it shouldn't really have that major effect.
Oh, that's interesting. It's so fascinating how your body takes what it needs out of the milk for the baby, and then just kind of interesting. That's a great question. I hope hopefully that helps. How do I boost my supply? only ever have enough to feed and never enough to store any? That's a good one.
So
too.
that's a good question. And honestly, you're just normal. And I think a lot of people have this expectation that they should have this entire chest full of milk in order for them to be a successful breastfeeding mother. But that's not necessarily the case by any means. We are meant to make just what our baby needs. So if you used your baby the first 3 to 4 weeks like you were supposed to set your milk supply, and then you started introducing the pump, you've set your milk supply for just what the baby needs. So expecting that you're going to have this huge chest freezer stash is probably not realistic. If you want to try and boost your milk supply, even if you just want to get a little bit more because maybe you're going away for the weekend or something like that, try adding an additional pumping session every day. Or another thing you can do is try power pumping. So pick like a 2-hour time frame, maybe Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday night. So for 3 consecutive nights, maybe from 6 to 8, where you pump for 10 minutes, take it off for 10 minutes, pump for 10 minutes, take it off for 10 minutes, and do that for 2 hours. It's crazy. It's a lot of work, but it does tend to boost your supply because it mimics cluster feeding.
But you have to kind of keep that up, right?
Well, you would only do it for 3 days because you want to just have a boost. And if you keep doing it all the time, your body's not going to recognize that this is mimicking cluster feeding. It's just going to think it's the new feeding schedule.
Yeah, I think that sometimes, just ladies, so you know, I banned Facebook there for a while off my cell phone, but I still go on the computer and I check, but I have to get it back on. But, I joke about that, but I think that, I love Facebook. I'm not saying anything negative about Facebook, and I appreciate Facebook, but we go on and I think we start comparing ourselves to what else is going on out there. And, I subscribe to a lot of breastfeeding things on my Facebook. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, wow, freezer full of breast milk that I got in, 20 seconds or something ridiculous like that. Yeah. So that's not really typical.
And an oversupply is going to cause other sets of issues. And that's what a lot of people don't realize. A lot of these moms who have an entire freezer stash have a bit of an oversupply. And that can lead to a cranky baby. That can lead to plug ducts, mastitis, things like that, that we wouldn't normally consider as, the part of every normal day breastfeeding.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like, some of these breast pump manufacturers, which I work with a lot of them, they're going to say more milk in less time. What are your thoughts on that? Because I don't really think that's the case.
So I think most pumps are going to produce about 60 to 70% of what a baby can get at the breast. I worked for many years in a breastfeeding center. So we would physically do before and after feed weights to see what the baby would take. And then at another session, we'd have mom pump and see how much mom could get out. And I would say it was probably about 60 to 70% of what baby would get. So a baby is actually much more efficient than any breast pump. And let's be real, you love that baby a whole lot more than you love that plastic device that's sitting on your breast. So you're going to make more milk because your hormones are going to respond better to the baby versus your pump.
And I know that, some moms, they'll come into the breastfeeding shop and they'll say, the baby will only be a few days old and a thimble size of milk has been expressed, and they're freaking out thinking they should fill those bottles. I mean, I'm sure you've run into that before too.
Yes.
And that's just not the case. Like that's a pretty normal, think about how tiny a little baby's tummy is.
And in the first days of life, you only have colostrum for about the first 2 to 5 days of life. And colostrum is made in very small amounts. And day 1, baby's tummy is about the size of a teaspoon. So it's a tiny little marble, so it holds about a teaspoon at every feeding. And then by the time baby's about 3 days, we maybe get a half an ounce that we hold. And by the time baby's a full week, we're looking at probably somewhere between an ounce to an ounce and a half, depending on the baby. So having an expectation, again, in those early days that we're making a plethora of milk is unrealistic. And I think to some extent, we kind of set moms up for failure because they see these sample formula bottles that are sitting around at the hospital, and they're typically 2 ounces. So mom thinks that she's supposed to be able to pump that 2 ounces. And that's, again, an unrealistic expectation because that's not what our body's doing at that stage.
Now, what if, and depending on what time of day it is, you might be making more milk.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
So the wee hours of the morning when nobody wants to be awake is actually when you're making the most milk. So that's your highest level of prolactin for the day. So again, in those wee hours of the morning, you're going to be able to express more or feed more. That's oftentimes why we feed baby first thing in the morning and they zonk out for a while. So that's why all new moms like to sleep in because your baby sleeps in for a little while because that's usually your largest milk supply for the day. By the time it's time for us to go to bed, we're back to our lowest milk supply for the day. So that's our lowest level of prolactin. And that's a very normal fluctuation of prolactin for every new mom.
And then the cluster feeding begins. It did for me. It was just
Oh,
like,
yeah.
it was endless feeding between 5 and 7.
The
Pretty
witching
much
hours.
that's all I
We
did.
call them the witching hours. Yes.
Yeah.
The witching hours of breastfeeding, where everyone thinks something's wrong with their baby and they're super cranky and they cry all the time and they just want to eat, and eat. And I reassure you all, it's very normal. And I've had 3 of them personally, and they've all done the exact same thing.
Yeah, it's
and I promise one day they stop.
Yeah. Now, what about like one side and the other side? And we'll get to these questions, but it always seems like, and I just, I want to ask questions based on my experience. I always had one side that was going to be producing more milk than the other. Would that be because I was feeding longer or less on one side?
I would say
normal.
We all have an overachiever, and then we have another one that's along for the ride. So that's what I always tell new moms: don't expect both breasts to produce the same amount. They're not going to. One may have gotten a little bit of more stimulation at the beginning. One may have more milk making capacity than the other, and it's perfectly normal for one breast to make a slightly different amount than the other, and usually not significant, but noticeably different.
Yeah. It's interesting. All right, so onward bound to these questions. So Laura's gotten a lot of, when is the ideal time to actually start using your breast pump, right? When should you start pumping?
So as long as there's no complications, no issues with baby, there's no separation from baby, because that brings up a whole nother issue when to start pumping. Typically, we like to see you start pumping around a month of age. And that, it's very independent when you look at different mom situations, because maybe you need to go back to work at 6 weeks. Maybe you need to go back to work at 12 weeks. Maybe you're not going back to work at all. So everyone has a little bit different necessity, but I think 4 weeks is about the ideal time to start pumping, if only to offer a bottle. So if you want your baby to always take a bottle, that seems to be the best time to be able to have baby switch back and forth between bottle and breast. So again, somewhere around 1 month of age, I'd go ahead and, even if you just pump once a day, put it in a bottle and offer the baby the bottle, whatever bottle type you settled on. I typically tell everyone, my moms, to look up paced bottle feeding, because paced bottle feeding seems to be the best way to have a baby switch back and forth between breast and bottle.
What does that mean? Because I know the nipples all have different flows.
So we wanted to go with the slowest flow nipple, and paced bottle feeding just similarly mimics breastfeeding in the fact that you're not automatically putting milk right into the nipple. You have to let the baby suckle a little bit, just like they do at the breast, to get that let down. And then you tip the bottle up to give them some milk. So there's tons of videos out there. You can definitely find some videos on paced bottle feeding, which would be much better than me trying to describe it. So
for the nipple. Now, what about the cup feeding? That's always
cup
so
feeding.
Cute.
So yeah, I mean, supplement in the early days. Again, we talked about, they don't need, if they need to be supplemented, they don't need a lot of milk in the early days, but some babies will require supplementation. Maybe they've lost greater than 10% of their birth weight. And if that's the case, ideal supplementation occurs at another method other than a bottle. So for instance, a little medicine cup, a little eyedropper, or a little syringe is another good way. And then also supplementing at the breast with like a supplemental nursing system, which is just a little tiny feeding tube that gets put to our nipple, and baby suckling at the nipple and then also sucking at the breast.
I'm gonna, please ask any questions. That is great. I've seen the little cup feeding, and it's just very interesting to me. Yeah. It has nothing to do with the topic at hand, but it is cute.
Yes, and they actually make special cups just for cup feeding. So,
so what should you do? What should a mom do to prepare her pump? Because a lot of the moms, just so you guys know, is most insurances obviously cover the cost of a breast pump. So please do not go out and purchase one or put one on your registry, because chances are your insurance is going to cover it. And a lot of the moms, most moms, get the pump before they actually have the baby, which I think is a good idea, because you don't know if you're going to need it or not. But what's a good thing to do to prepare?
I think the first thing is to make sure you're getting the breast pump that's good for your use. If you're someone who's going to be pumping a lot, you're returning to work at 6 weeks, you want to get a pump that's going to stand up to a lot of use, like a good tabletop pump, like a Spectra, Medela, those type of pumps, solely because they are definitely going to produce more milk than your hands-free devices like your Willow and your LV. Most moms will tell you that they get less milk when utilizing them. Not that they're bad pumps, because they have their place too. I mean, certainly if you can't pump discreetly and you don't have a place to pump at work, they are much better than nothing at all. So, so really you need to figure out what pump it is that works best for your individual situation. Once you get that pump, don't wait until baby's born. Open up that pump and read the manual.
Read the manual.
Learn about your pump. I can't tell you how many people that are panicking and now they need to pump and they don't know what to do. start with reading the manual. There's tons of videos out there. Most of your pump companies have created their own videos that you can follow along with, learn how to hook it up, learn what parts you need to wash, because not every pump part needs to be washed and some of it should not be submerged in water. So you want to make sure that you're doing all of that too, because it's super important. And then again, watch some of those videos because it's going to tell you everything. When you're getting ready to pump too, look at your pump parts. You know, if you washed them recently, that's great. You know, they're clean. Just make sure there's no mold growing anywhere. Sometimes where we have connections and things, if we haven't been unconnecting things, we can actually grow some mold in there. So we want to make sure that everything's mold free. Make sure there's nothing growing on there.
Warm soapy water too.
Warm soapy water, yep. And when you're washing your pump, it should never be in your sink. Any idea why that is?
I wash a lot of things in my
You
sink.
wash a lot of things in your sink, including chicken and other things. So that all has bacteria, and that bacteria then can leach into your pump. There is actually an instance a few years ago of a baby who was definitely immunocompromised, who ended up passing away from mom's sink. Virtually.
Geez.
The pump ended up being contaminated. The milk ended up being contaminated with a certain type of bacteria. And when they cultured the sink, it actually came from the sink.
Oh my
So
gosh.
when you're washing your pump parts, it needs to be in a separate basin. I don't care if you grab your mixing bowl and wash it in that bowl. That's fine, as long as you're not washing it directly in your sink.
That's it. Now, I have a lot of, and we'll come back to this, but I always have all these breast pump manufacturers. You know, there's so many new pumps coming out, so many new products, and they're always hitting me up to try to evaluate them. And we just got something from a company called Pumpables. I'm actually really excited about that pump. It's not, it can only be sold for retail. It's not FDA cleared yet, but it looks incredible. And I'm hoping in the fall we can start carrying that pump. But they have a UV sterilizer for the pump.
Awesome.
So what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that'll take care of it?
I mean, that should take care of any of the bacteria,
Yeah.
Especially if you're taking care of an immunocompromised baby. If you have a baby who's in the NICU, you want to make sure that your pump parts are as clean as they can be. Or if you have a baby who's got any immunocompromised disorder for that matter, you want to make sure that those pump parts are as clean as they can be. So not only washing them after every use, but it wouldn't be a bad idea to at least sterilize them once a day. If you have a normal full-term baby, is sterilization necessary? Not really, because for the most part, it's sterile when you sterilize it and then you take it out and it's not sterile anymore. So, and
That's true.
do we really sterilize our forks and spoons? Not really. So if we're healthy and not
We don't
having any
use those
issues,
here.
that's not necessarily a huge problem.
And they have the steam bags too.
Yeah, the steam bags are great. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Great.
Even just putting them in the dishwasher on hot setting and then heated dry is the equivalent of sterilization too. So, but those little sterilizing bags are great, especially if you're on the go and you're working a 12-hour shift and you want to have the opportunity to sterilize in between, because heaven knows what else you've touched in the day.
Yeah.
So that's always a good option.
Yeah. We got a lot of stuff here. What pump do you recommend? Now that I know I could talk about breast pumps all day, but I'm going to ask her because I just always say, and we have a Motive pump right here, and she was referencing a tabletop pump, but there's lots of different, and I have a video on all the different types of pumps: hospital, wearable, and double electric, single electric. So it goes over the, breast pumps 101. But what are your thoughts on it? A new mom that's never used a pump before.
A new mom who's never used a pump before, she's probably going to want some type of double electric tabletop, sort of like the one we see back here, the Motif Luna, or a Spectra, or a Medela. I mean, they're all very similar in nature. They have different features. I tend to like the one that we have back here. It's actually a fairly new one in comparison to some of the other names, but it seems to give you all the same benefits of Spectra and just be a little bit smaller. So again, it's all personal preference. If you have the opportunity, take a look at pumps, look over some of the different blogs that are out there. There's lots of great ones that do some pump comparisons, including Patty's.
Oh, yeah, and also My New Little Life by Allison. She's amazing. You can just search that up on YouTube, and she's got lots of good.
I have to say, I'm a lactation consultant, and I learned stuff from her. So
Yeah.
definitely a great resource out there for new moms to take a look at. And I think she also has a Facebook page too, where a lot of moms discuss what exactly it is they find helpful in a pump. So I don't think every pump is created for every woman. I think you need to figure out which one's going to work best for your personal situation.
I agree, and obviously I could talk about that a lot. And these wearable pumps they're great, and they have their purpose. And I think we talked about that on the last time, but they're definitely not for the first time pumping mom, I don't think, but call us and we can go over that. And please feel free to ask any questions or invite your friends. We're trying out different times for these Ask a Lactation Consultants just to see, we have customers, patient moms, new moms all over the world, really. So we're fiddling with new times. If you ever have any suggestions or Actually, if you have a small group of friends that you want to get together, we can actually do one of these just for you guys, because I've done that before in the past, and that's really fun. But let's talk about storing expressed milk. That's a big one. That's an important one. So there's a lot of different things out there. There's milk trays, there's bags. Some insurances do cover the cost of bags. We work a lot with TRICARE, and that TRICARE benefit will pay for breast milk storage bags. So what are your thoughts on storing?
So the number one recommended way to store breast milk is in glass, but let's be realistic, ladies, who has the space to freeze a whole bunch of glass bottles? Not too many of us. So food safe glass is first, then comes hard plastic, such as like your Medela bottles that you can just screw the lids on. Those are lovely. And then next comes the bags. The reason we recommend the bags last is because a lot of times the fat adheres to the soft of those bags. So if you're using the bags, you want to make sure that you're kind of getting out that excess fat that's kind of stuck on the sides there. Because remember, when you pump, your fluid and your fatty layer are going to separate. So remind your significant others of that, because otherwise they throw it out and think it's bad. I know that from personal experience. So make sure that they're aware milk does separate. Make sure any caregivers know that milk does separate. I actually went to a lactation conference not too long ago where one of the lactation presenters actually discussed the fact that she had a nanny call her and said, look, this mom is bringing me over and over again breast milk that is bad, and I'm throwing it away and substituting formula. And the reason she thought it was bad is because the watery layer and the fatty layer were separating. So it's important to make sure that we're educating whatever caregivers you have to make sure that they know how breast milk works, because it certainly doesn't look like the cow's milk we buy in the store.
Right. It's a little yellow.
Right. It's kind of like a creamy hue. It can even have a greenish tint to it. I actually have a good friend, when she pumped, she ate a lot of kale with her breast milk.
Oh, interesting.
Kale. Yeah. So it can have a bluish hue at times. So color changes I'm not concerned about. The only color change I'm concerned about is if all of a sudden you look down and your milk is Pepto-Bismol pink. I'm not talking a little bit of blood in there. I'm talking Pepto-Bismol bright pink. Then I'm concerned that you have a certain type of bacteria infection and you'd want to get that checked out.
And you wouldn't want to give that to the
You wouldn't want to give that to the baby until you've talked to one of the caregivers.
Or you can call us and we can help you through that as well. And insurance will cover any of those questions that you have, believe it or not. But all right, so can you read that? Too far for me. Yeah.
Those of us that should wear glasses.
I have another question.
How often do you recommend pumping at work? I work from 6 in the morning until about 3. And I nurse my baby all night long, but my supply is decreasing a lot. So not uncommon for that to happen. I'm curious as to how far you are out from delivery, how old the baby is, but typically you want to try and mimic your baby's feeding schedule when you're at work. Also make sure as baby's aging that you are changing out your pump parts periodically. So your valves and those things, because that is one thing that a lot of people don't recognize needs to happen on a regular basis, because otherwise the suction goes down a little bit.
Yeah, this little part right here, this is called a duckbill valve. I don't know if you can see it. This controls a lot of your pump. The suction of your pump can be completely thrown off if this is just open a little bit. I don't know if you can see that.
And they age. I mean, they age over time. So you want to make sure that you're changing those out frequently. I think some insurance companies will even
cover those
when you're changing them out. So that could be another thing that's happening if you've been pumping for a while, that your pump parts need to be changed out. I actually just had a neighbor who had this issue and we were able to troubleshoot, and she's back to making what she was making. So but again, you want to try and mimic what baby's pumping schedule is. Typically about every 3 hours is what you're looking at on average, depending on how old your baby is. And the best thing to do if you're noticing a bit of a decrease in supply is try adding in a pumping session. And realize there's other reasons that supply can drop. Certain people start hormones for contraception around 6 weeks. Sometimes that can influence our supply, especially estrogen-containing products can decrease our supply. So those are other things that can have an impact. When we get our period, sometimes we can have a little drop in supply.
I also feel like the pumps, sorry to interrupt, but
that's okay.
I always recommend towards the end of a pumping session, because this happens a lot. The moms come flying in, they say, oh my gosh, I'm losing my milk supply. And I said, did you go back to work? And yes, I went back to work. And I feel like like you were saying earlier, baby is always going to express better, get more milk. So towards the end of a pumping session, I would do a little massage. Yeah. And there's actually some new bras coming out, which I'm really excited about, by Lilu. And we're going to have them on our website in a couple of weeks. But it actually massages while you're pumping. so you can get more milk. It's a really nice product, but I would recommend a little.
Yeah. So while you're actually waiting for those bras to come out, if you Google Stanford video, hands-on pumping will typically get you more milk. Other ways to get more milk is to watch a video of your baby. Remember, you love your baby more than you love the plastic piece. Don't watch the bottles fill. Cover yourself up, put a drape over your chest, and do not watch those bottles fill, because that's kind of a psychological little influencer there that usually doesn't influence on the positive end. So cover up those bottles. Have something that smells like baby. Like I said, watch videos of the baby. If you can hear the baby cooing and stuff, you typically get a better letdown. A lot of our milk supply is psychological. So if we're getting a better milk supply over and over again, we're going to be able to realize that it has to do with the baby, whether it's baby suckling at the breast or visually seeing the baby. Even NICU moms, when they're struggling to get a good milk supply, if they pump next to their baby in the NICU, their supply tends to increase.
What about the lactation cookies? Because I see she's asking about those and all these supplements and all of that stuff.
And I don't know. Such not a big fan of any of that stuff.
Yeah.
We know you need about an extra 500 calories a day to make your milk. So if you are calorie deprived or you're exercising a lot and using up a lot of your calories, you will notice an influence in your milk supply. Herbal supplements, I can go either way on those depending on supply issues. And I like to look at each individual and see what's going on with the supply before I'll recommend herbal supplements, because some herbal supplements for some women can have the opposite effect. Things, for instance, like fenugreek, and if you have a thyroid disorder or diabetes, can actually have a negative effect on your milk supply. So I'm very cautious to recommend any of that stuff without knowing mom's history. So I'm not huge into the lactation cookies and things like that because they often have the herbal supplements in them, but just usually increasing your caloric intake will do so. Eat to hunger, drink to thirst. That's one of the biggest rules of breastfeeding.
Yeah, that's good advice. I know sometimes when some of these supplements came out, it was just like the hot thing and everyone was flying into the store getting all these supplements, and doctor recommended. We would never, we would always say, talk to your physician or lactation consultant, but it seems to be not as popular anymore.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I think we've realized, lactation for a long time hasn't been a very well-researched, well-investigated thing of health. I mean, realistically, it's probably one of the best things we can do for our babies to get their health off to a good start. Mm-hmm. But it's just not something that anybody in the healthcare world ever decided was really important to actually monitor and research. And we now know differently, and we're learning more, and research is definitely more on the forefront now. I'm actually at Penn State doing some research myself, so it definitely makes a huge difference now that we're seeing it as a healthcare world, what is researched and what isn't. And I'm definitely more of an evidence-based practice type person. Like if I can find the evidence, that's what I'm going to tell you to do. And the biggest evidence to increase your milk supply is to have more stimulation. Pumping, hand expression when you're done pumping, hands-on pumping, skin to skin contact with that baby, because that baby is a great little massager of the breast.
Yeah.
We all see it as hitting and their hands being
in
the way.
The cutest thing. They massage, like, do you see a kitten nursing?
Yeah, we currently have kittens at our house, so we watch them all the time nurse. My kids are always like, what are they doing? I'm like, they're getting a letdown.
It's the cutest thing. But that's a great question. So I'm sure you get that all the time. But also, my baby is 2 months old and she is sleeping through the night. Can I get right through as well, or should I wake up and pump? I am going to grab something that I can show here. So you can take that question. I'll be right back.
Okay, sounds good. So it's important to protect your milk supply at all costs. The first thing you want to know is if baby's gaining adequate weight. Baby at 2 months old should still be gaining about 3/4 of an ounce to potentially 1.5 ounces a day. If baby's doing that, you're probably A-okay to let her sleep through the night. I'm going to tell you though, you're probably not going to make it through the night because you're probably going to be a little bit uncomfortable. And remember, your greatest milk supply is in the wee hours of the morning. So if you're a person who needs to stash away milk because you're going back to work or you're going back to school, you might be a good candidate to get up in those wee hours of the morning and do a pumping session. If you're not planning on doing any of that, your milk supply is good, she's gaining great, let her sleep through the night. You use her cue-based feedings, and when she tells you she's hungry, that's when she's hungry and it's time to eat. But realize the first few nights you might be a little uncomfortable. So pump a little bit if you want to work to a point where you can sleep through the night. Pump for a little bit, make yourself comfortable, and go back to bed. Don't pump to empty because that's just telling your breast to make more milk at that time. Hopefully that answered your question. Do you ladies have any other questions for us? I have a question. So I need to feed my baby express breast milk. What milk do I start with, as I have fresh, refrigerated, and frozen? So a lot of people don't think about the fact of what they need to start with. And you typically want to start with your fresh milk first, because that has the live antibodies in it. When you go to the store and you buy formula, there's no live antibodies in formula because it's sitting on a shelf somewhere. So live antibodies are still in that fresh milk. Go ahead and use that first. Then you'll go into your freezer stash. So fresh, refrigerated, freezer stash is next. When you go into your freezer stash, you're always going to use oldest to newest. All right. So you're going to start with your oldest milk first and then work to using to your newest. That's one of the best guidelines you can have. So make sure when you're pumping, you're labeling your milk, especially if baby's going to go to daycare, you're labeling the milk with baby's name, and then also labeling it with the day that you pumped. Label.
I know that you said, glass if possible, but a lot of moms use these.
Oh yeah,
bags. And
I mean, I use them, so I think they're probably the most realistic thing to be able to store in one's freezer.
Yeah, and a lot of them have little writing on here that you can actually, which is great, because that is important to do. I never did that, but I should have.
We do research and we say what's best, but it also has to be what's realistic for the family too. Cool, if you have a great big chest freezer just used for milk, use the glass bottles. If you don't have that much, then go ahead and use those bags. I think those bags are great. There's many different kinds out there. I don't know that moms have found one that's definitely better than the other. They're all about the same size.
Yeah, and lay them flat, right? Because you have some storage systems.
Lay them flat until they freeze, and then once they're frozen and they're flattened, you can put them in like a shoebox from oldest to newest. So they make all kinds of fancy dividers that you can buy for breast milk, but the shoebox works well too. So you probably have some of those anyway.
When I went back to work, my father-in-law had to thaw out my breast milk. So I don't think it was his favorite thing in the world to do, but he did great with it. So I appreciate that, Papa Tom. We're getting a lot of good questions. My baby is 2 months old. Is she sleeping through the night? Oh, you got that one.
When first starting to breastfeed with your newborn, do they feed off both breasts, and also for how long? Boy, if I could answer that question in detail, I could win $1 million. So you're going to start with breast number 1 and let the baby feed on that breast as long as he or she wants to feed. A baby can feed anywhere from 10 minutes to 30 some minutes, maybe even longer on a breast. Let the baby finish breast number 1. The longer baby stays on breast number 1, the fattier milk the baby's getting. Then go ahead, burp the baby, change the baby, offer breast 2. I actually just recently saw a mom who was told 10 minutes and 10 minutes and you should be done. 10 minutes and 10 minutes may not be what your baby needs. And then when stimulation's not happening adequately, you may end up with not a great milk supply. So breast number 1 until baby's finished. How do you know baby's finished? Baby pops off the breast. You might even see a little bit of milk run out the side of the mouth. They fall asleep at the breast where they're no longer actively sucking. If that's the case, you can go ahead and unlatch, burp the baby if necessary. Not every breastfed baby burps, and then offer the second breast.
And then when you go back for the next feeding, would you start on the breast that you?
So the next feeding, you would start on the breast that you fed with the least. I tell moms, buy yourself a cheap jelly bracelet at the dollar store and stick it on your wrist in the early days. That reminds you what breast to start with. Once your milk supply is in, your breasts will remind you what breast to start with. But until your full milk supply is in, it's hard to remember which one to start with. So simply feed breast 1 until baby's all done, then offer breast 2. So every feeding you'll offer both breasts. Will baby take both breasts at every feeding? Not necessarily, but you're going to offer at every feeding.
That's great advice. I used to have this log, and I'd write down the time, and then I would write down what side. But then I would forget to write stuff down. I'm like, I just should have gotten a bracelet.
It's all too much. Yeah. Think about, what did our great-great-grandmothers do? Yeah. They just breastfed. They didn't watch the clock. They didn't mark down. They didn't have any fancy jelly bracelets. They just fed their baby. Yeah. And we all turned out just fine, or we wouldn't be here, right?
Say you. All right, what do we have?
I'm trying to skip through some of these here. Sometimes my baby seems to be frustrated when she's nursing, scratching at me, herself, flailing around. Does that mean she's not getting enough? Well, first of all, it depends on how old she is, because as the babies get older, they kind of become acrobatic nursers, would be a bit best way to describe them. They're flipping upside down, turning all around. They're very easily distracted.
New things, right?
Yeah, trying new things, just like what we like to do, right? So it's definitely age dependent in that regard. If she's young and just starting with the frustration, maybe she could have a little bit of reflux. Maybe it takes a little bit too long for the letdown. So if she's a baby that's getting a lot of bottles perhaps during the day while you're at work, she may not be having paced bottle feeding and she wants that immediate gratification. And unfortunately, sometimes our breasts don't give that immediate gratification. For some women, it can take 2 minutes, maybe even longer for the letdown to occur. So 6 weeks.
6 weeks.
Yeah. So 6 weeks. Did you start introducing bottles yet? I would say if you started introducing bottles, maybe it's a flow thing. Try doing some hand expressing. Try getting the letdown started and then put her on and see if that makes a difference. Some babies also at 6 weeks will dislike how fast the letdown is. So that could be another issue. So it's a hard one to say. That would be probably one that I would say probably should be taken a look at and be evaluated. A, make sure she's gaining weight well. And B, we want to just see why is she getting frustrated? Is she getting frustrated at time of letdown or before letdown? Try and pay attention if you hear her kind of gulping during the frustration, or okay, so no bottles yet. So pay attention to letdown. Is she gulping and struggling at the time of letdown, or is it before letdown occurs that she's frustrated and trying to make the letdown happen? I have 2 different answers there, but if it's, I'm struggling to get the letdown, try doing some hand expressing first, get the milk flow started, and then put her on.
She wants the letdown to happen quicker.
She wants the letdown to happen quicker. And she's honestly, like,
learning.
We think they're hitting us and we're frustrated because their arms are flailing and they're really just trying to help us get the letdown. They're just not really coordinated and good at massaging yet.
So you can't ask.
Yeah. They can't say, hurry up already.
Yeah. And different flows. It happened. I know sometimes when I was nursing, it would be slow to start, but then forget about it. It would be
and then the fire hose would open.
Yeah, the fire hose would open. Yeah.
And I mean, some babies truly they get frustrated because the milk is coming out so fast. They're like, what are we doing? And they'll actually pull back because they're actually clamping the nipple when they pull back. And when they pull back, what they're doing is actually slowing some of the flow.
Yeah, so they're smart. They instinctively know how to do this. So I think taking cues from the baby too.
Yeah, absolutely. Do I need to be supplementing with vitamin D the whole time I breastfeed? At least until baby's taking foods that regularly have vitamin D in them. So I would, at least for the first 6 months of exclusive breastfeeding, be supplementing with vitamin D. Research tells us you can supplement baby with vitamin D, which is a Just D drop. That would be 400 international units. Or you can supplement mom with vitamin D. A lot of people don't realize they can supplement their own diet with vitamin D, and that's 6,400 international units. Don't go out and look for a 6,400 unit capsule because it doesn't exist. So you want to get as close to 6,400 as possible. I'm not even sure where they came up with 6,400 because it's hard to get to 6,400.
Let me ask you, should you know your vitamin D levels first?
So it's not a bad idea if you're going to supplement yourself to see if you've had a vitamin D level. Because honestly,
it's low usually.
Yeah. I mean, when we really stand back, and I often wonder if that's even why vitamin D doesn't cross our milk supply really well, is because of the fact that most of us are probably a little bit vitamin D deficient. We tend to not go in the sun as much as our ancestors did. When we do go in the sun, we tend to wear a lot of sunblock. So we all tend to have lower than average vitamin D levels, unless you're someone who gets to live by the beach, and then we are all jealous of you. So, but that being said, you can definitely check with your provider to see if they'd order a vitamin D level, and most often they will.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, and just double check that you're not super deficient. If you're average, it's fine to supplement. If you're coming in at super deficient and you're super deficient, I'd probably just supplement the baby.
Because you get blood work anyway, right? After you've given a baby. So the doctor is already looking at
So not always do you get blood work after you have the baby, to be honest. Usually they just anticipate everything's going back to normal unless you have a complaint, or unless there was something they were following up with, like gestational diabetes or anemia or something like that.
Interesting. Always learn something new on these. Does anybody else have any other questions? Because I know that it's getting close to my bedtime. No, I'm just kidding. I could go on forever, but I don't want to, again, is there anything else that you want to go over tonight?
I think we've talked a lot about it.
Yeah. If you have any questions, and we will be following up with the comments here after the fact. And just so you ladies know, I always want to take a, we're both all about women's health. And I think that we have a passion for helping new moms. We love being moms. We all have kids, and, that's really why we're both in this business. And just the fact that the people, the United States, I think, is catching up with women's health and really supporting and giving us more maternity leave, especially for the moms in the military, but also, recognizing the fathers, or the
need some paternity leave. Yes, a lot of companies are jumping on board with that too.
Yeah, and then just, the fact that the telehealth is now covered for the lactation visits, and most insurances are understanding the importance of it. It's all really, really great stuff, and we keep moving forward. So, we have another question. Let's.
Oh, that is a great question, Amira. Yeah. How often should nursing pads be changed? As someone who worked in an OBGYN office, I would hope that everybody's getting this information, because I saw an awful lot of breast infections from people who didn't change their nursing pads very often. So just like you would change your maxi pad frequently, you want to make sure you're changing your nursing pads frequently. If they're wet, it's a warm, damp environment that bacteria can grow in, yeast can grow in. So anytime they're wet, I would change them. I think that's a good rule of thumb. They make them in disposable, that you just like a maxi pad, you take it off and throw it away. And they also make reusable ones now that you can throw in the wash. So that's a great thing too, because it, obviously helps to save the earth. And what a lot of women do is they don't have near as many reactions to the reusable ones. Some people will react to what's on the outside of those disposable ones because it's almost like a plasticky like material.
We can stay on for a little bit longer. I just didn't want to. So yeah, we'll definitely answer these questions. We just got somebody on right now. Oh no, I'm just tuning in. No problem.
So that's being taped, right?
Yeah. We can, we're going to answer this question. Where did the question go?
Here. I have to go back to work when my baby is 12 weeks. When should I start pumping? Ideal time is around that 4-week mark. So around that 4-week mark, I would tell you, start pumping first thing in the morning after your first morning feed. So let's say baby feeds for the first time at 7 a.m. each morning, or approximately 7. Baby can feed on both breasts, and then you're going to put on your pump. Okay. Put the pump on, pump for 15 minutes. I guess I'm getting tired too. Pump for 15 minutes. You get what you get and stick it in the refrigerator. All right. Next morning, do the same thing. Feed baby on both breasts. Put the breast pump on for 15 minutes. What you get, put it in the fridge. Once you have, say, 2 to 4 ounces, you're going to go ahead and put it in a freezer safe container. Always make sure it's a food safe container and that it's BPA free. Put it in that food safe container, breast milk safe container, and then freeze it. All right. And that way you're starting to have some supply for when you go back. I say 2 to 4 ounces because that's your average breast milk baby feeding, is somewhere between 2 to 4 ounces. They don't typically take much more than 2 to 4 ounces, and we don't want to waste it. We don't want to save it in 5 to 10 ounce increments. And now all of a sudden baby's only taking 2 to 4 and you've defrosted it. And now it's only good for a certain period of time. We will share with all of you today at the end a link that actually provides you like a little handout as far as how long milk is good on the countertop, how long it's good in the refrigerator, how long it's good in the freezer. So you can stick that on your refrigerator. Yeah. So again, I would start doing that. And then also around 4 weeks, another time of day, I would pump, put it in a bottle and start offering that baby the bottle. So the baby always takes a bottle. You don't want to be the mom who has to go back to work and baby hasn't learned how to take a bottle yet. I have had that. This is not a very good experience. My second child did not want to take a bottle and I had to go back to work as a nurse, and it was a very stressful situation.
That is stressful. Yeah.
I spent probably hundreds of dollars before His Highness decided which bottle nipple combination he was going to take. But God love him, he is still my pickiest child out of all of them. So
it's amazing how their personalities are the same.
Yes.
Right? It's a really,
and
really
he's a brilliant little boy, but he knows what he wants, and he only wants what he wants.
Yeah. We watched it. My best friend, her stepmom had a baby, and she said, "Can you watch the baby?" And the baby never had a bottle before, and we were panicking. So we had a little dropper and we were shooting breast milk in through the. We're gonna answer one more question just because it is getting late and we've got kids that we need to pick up.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Those darn kids.
Yes. I'm surprised he's not texting me.
Yeah.
So we actually answered the question about morning, evening breast milk before. I wouldn't necessarily be concerned about storing separately your morning and evening breast milk. It gets too cumbersome to try and keep a track of all of that, and you're going to make yourself crazy. Just mark down what day it was pumped. I never kept track of morning versus evening. My kids all turned out fine. I wouldn't stress over those minor details. I know Facebook tends to tell us a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen a difference for the people who have done that and haven't done that. I haven't seen a difference in their babies. So I would not worry about that. Also, it says your body knows when your baby is sick. Absolutely. Your body absolutely knows when baby's sick, especially when you're feeding baby at the breast. There is a reverse suction kit that happens there. A little bit of saliva gets pulled into the breast to let your body know what baby's been exposed to. Your baby can then or your body can then boost the immunity to whatever baby's been exposed to. A lot of times when we're pumping moms and we know baby's sick and we're pumping in between there, when we pump, we'll actually see the milk looks different. That's your milk changing to help meet the baby's needs. Breast milk is so unique. It changes to meet baby's needs as baby gets older, as baby gets sick. It's nothing that formula can do. So it's a pretty interesting body that we have and the ability that it has to really take care of our baby for a lifetime.
Yep. All right. Should we take this last one or should I?
Yep.
Yeah.
We'll do one more, ladies. So we keep saying that. We keep going one more. If I'm able to visit my baby while she's at daycare every once in a while, should I drop in and breastfeed or should they exclusively use the bottle? Ma'am, if you've got the opportunity to breastfeed that baby, because before you know it, they're not breastfeeding anymore. I can't even tell you the last time my daughter breastfed. It just happened one day and it was a few days later and I was like, gosh, when was the last time I breastfed? And I always wished I'd remember that.
Yeah.
But also remember, baby's getting more milk at the breast. It's more calming to baby. And remember, breastfeeding isn't just about the breast milk and the nutrition. It's about the bonding. It's about the love. It's about being able to calm that baby down. So if baby's having a rough day at daycare, baby's going to do awesome if you come in and breastfeed. So if you're able to do that, go for it.
I am just putting in the comments. Thank you so much for tuning in. It means the world to us. We love doing these.
Yes.
I could go on.
It's been a lot of fun.
They're energizing. Yeah. And again, continue to ask your questions. We will circle back around, but we plan on doing these every 2 weeks. If you have a group of friends that you want to get together, we can actually do one just exclusively for you guys too. So thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
Have a great evening, ladies.
Good night, ladies. Take care.